Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alistair Young. I'm a professor and the Neal Family Chair in the Nunn School of International Affairs here at Georgia Tech. It is my privilege to welcome you to this symposium on the future of North American trade. The headlines today are understandably full of events on the other side of the world, but today's symposium will underline that there is important business much closer to home. Since the North American Free Trade Agreement was concluded in 1994, the United States, Canada, and Mexico have built an incredibly integrated, sophisticated, competitive, and valuable continental economy. This summer, the current iteration of that agreement, the US, Canada, Mexico agreement, USMCA, or some say USMCA, and then each country has its own ordering of the initials, is undergoing a joint review. The intention of that review was to make sure that the agreements kept up with the changing nature of economic activity. At the end of the review, each government will have to make a choice, whether to renew the USMCA for 16 more years, with another joint review after 6, to withdraw from the USMCA following a minimum of 6 months' notice to the other parties, or 3, to continue the USMCA without renewing it, in which case the agreement will be subject to annual reviews until it expires in 2036. If one country chooses option 2 or 3, it obviously has implications for the others. In December, US Trade Representative Greer informed Congress that he would not recommend renewing the agreement unless there were changes, which means that the agreement, the renew, is a more substantive and controversial process than had originally been envisaged. Today, we're going to explore how we got here, what the stakes involved in the review are, what the key issues are from the perspectives of the participants, and what the prospects for agreement are. We'll begin with a panel discussion, which will explore the review from the perspectives of the 3 participating countries. We'll then have a buffet lunch, and followed by a fireside chat with University System of Georgia Chancellor Sonny Perdue, who is here in his because of his previous role as US Secretary of Agriculture. Before we get stuck into the substance, I'd like to begin with some thanks. We are grateful to the generous support from CN, which is funding this event, and to Ambassador Gordon Giffen, who's a member of the Nunn School's advisory board, who made that gift possible. To thank Ayana Aline for organizing the travel and accommodation for out-of-town speakers, and Eric Koob in the back for being my right hand, pulling together all the logistics and essentially making sure this actually happened. I would also like to thank my partners in crime, Joanna Hollis and Ash Miller from the Canadian Consulate, who were wonderful collaborators in putting this event together. I'd also like to take this opportunity to draw your attention to some upcoming events being organized by the Nunn School. You'll find them on the back of the program. There is a QR code which will take you to the details for the locations of the events. I should also note that we are planning a virtual event on the conflict in Iran. Those details will be on our website once they're settled. If you want to be sure not to miss out on any of our future events, speak to myself or Eric, and we'll put you on our mailing list. I would now like to invite the Consul Generals of Canada and Mexico to make a few welcoming remarks. First, Rosalind Kwan, Consul General of Canada.
Thank you so much, Alistair. Thank you to the Simon Nunn School, to Professor Young, and all the great folks here at the Simon Nunn School and at Georgia Tech for putting together this special conversation today. I've been looking forward to this, and thank you to everyone for joining it. I'm just going to be listening today and learning a lot. I've been looking forward to, particularly because we've got some wonderful and knowledgeable speakers today, and terrific moderators as well. So, this is something that I feel I'm gonna be fully enriched after the conversation today. And particularly in today's, shifting global dynamics, if I can put it that way, and in increasing competition across the globe, strengthening North American trade relations and our partnerships is vital to remaining resilient and to be competitive and to have our three countries, United States, Mexico, and Canada, be well positioned to compete in the global and international stage. And Canada, United States, Mexico have enjoyed long-standing diplomatic relations, characterized by growing trade and investment, deep people-to-people ties, close defense and security partnerships, as well as cultural connections that are rich and deep. And one of these examples, it won't be a surprise to you, is what we're going to see this summer here, right here in Atlanta and in Canada and across the United States and Mexico, which is the FIFA World Cup. So the FIFA World Cup will bring together, the three hosts, but also people from around the world. And that demonstrates the power of the North American relationship and what we can achieve together. So just very quickly on, many of you may have heard about the great, extensive and integrated economies between Canada, United States, and Mexico. And Canada and United States enjoy a relationship of trade, about 1 trillion in trade goods and services. And right here in Georgia, I think the bilateral trade relationship is about $14 billion between Canada and the United States. But also, as we work closely with the United States, we work very closely with Mexico. And one of our largest trade delegations just visited Mexico 2 weeks ago to forge new and build on existing relationships. And so that's work we continue to do. And as we look forward to the review that Alistair mentioned this summer, today will be an occasion to be able to look at the opportunities, but as well as the challenges that are before us. And I think the speakers and the moderators today will help us, guide us in that conversation. And as I've been talking to businesses in the last number of months, the one resounding comment that I hear is that they value stability and predictability. And with that, this is what the USMCA or CUSMA or TMEC provides. So the conversation today is particularly important and timely. And I want to thank everybody for taking part. And for those who are part of the business community, if you have views and outcomes that you want to see and or you've benefited from the USMCA, please convey those views to those decision makers that you talk to. And following the conversation today, you may have more views, and I look forward to listening and to learning from all of our speakers and moderators today. And I want to thank again our host for having us. So thank you so much.
I'd now like to invite Rafael La Vega, the Consul General of Mexico, to say some words of welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Thank you for making this possible. As my dear friend and colleague from Canada just pointed out, the largest Canadian trade mission went to Mexico a couple of weeks ago. It was 240 trade organizations represented with more than 300 delegates. Was that too much, too many? I don't know, but it was historic, and they are preparing very well for the USMCA scenarios. Our relation with Canada couldn't be better at this point in time. With the United States, I will just mention that Mexico is the country that buys more American products than any other country in the world. And Mexico is the country that sells more in dollars to the US. We closed 2025 with $870 billion in the bilateral trade. So everything is set up for success, in my view. But I know that academicians are pointing the finger at issues that are challenging. And I just beg you guys, the speakers of today, please keep optimistic and constructive, because I already have enough reasons to be up at night. And number two, and more importantly, because the Canadian, the American, and the Mexican peoples deserve it. Thank you very much.
Can I invite the first panel to come up, please? So I just want to, I'm delighted that Chris Clark, the President and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, has agreed to moderate this panel. And with this, I'll turn it over to him, literally and.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Well, good morning. It's a little pitiful for a Chamber of Commerce guy to ask you that. Let's try again. Good morning. So much better. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being with us today. Before we jump into the panel discussion, I just want to kind of frame this from our perspective at the Georgia Chamber. We represent about 50,000 businesses statewide in every county, every SIC code, international companies, small mom and pops, Coca-Cola next door, and everybody in between. And this discussion about international trade, particularly the tariff discussion that we've had this last year, has caused a lot of issues with our members. And we've spent a lot of time educating them, helping them figure out how to move forward, working with our partners in this room, with the consul generals, to try to find good solutions and to help Georgia companies continue to operate with the relationships that they have, not just in Canada and Mexico, but around the world. Mexico and Canada are our two top trading partners for the state of Georgia, have been, always will be. They are a key source of foreign direct investment into the state of Georgia. Obviously, incredible tourism, thanks to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. And you might not know this, but the state of Georgia has actually had trade offices in both countries for, gosh, over 40 years now. And so it doubles down on our focus. But from my perspective, it's not just about trade agreements in businesses. It's about the relationships between these three countries, what it means when we stand together economically, when we stand together militarily, when we stand together just as friends. And so a lot of our focus has been to raise the awareness of these long-term relationships in the state of Georgia to our local elected leaders as well as our members of Congress. And so we believe in the importance of the USMCA, just like we believed in the importance of NAFTA, and will continue to lobby with our team on behalf of that. But the panel that we've got up here have been knee-deep in these relationships and negotiations for a long time. And so what I'm going to do is let them do a quick, short introduction of themselves. And then if you would, just tell us a little bit about your history with either NAFTA or USMCA or both, and then we'll come back and dig into the negotiations. And we will make your notes. We will save time to take questions from the audience today too. So, Ambassador, I'll let you start.
Well, hello. This works?
This works.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you to Georgia Tech, Adam, Alistair, for organizing this. And I really, I feel like I'm in with family here, obviously with the consulate, our Mexican friends. I also want to acknowledge the presence here of the Délégué Général du Québec, who's right sitting here, Madame Rivard. And then we have Ricky Bivington, a long friend of Canada from the World Affairs Council, and a colleague of mine from the Pendleton Group, Guy, is somewhere around here. And that brings me to just my history. I was posted here years ago as Consul General, and at a time of change, it was the ascent of Donald Trump, and the debate over trade was churning then. You'll recall he ran on a campaign to tear it up. And few people know just how important Georgia is in the relationship in saving NAFTA. Not only did Sonny Perdue, with the founder of the Pendleton Group, Craig Lesser, who was at the time Economic Development Commissioner, put together a group of Canadian provinces with American states called SUCP that endures today. But when he became agriculture, I mentioned you, Guy, when you were out, so sorry, you missed that. Now you don't know what I said. And so he was really convinced at the time, Secretary Perdue, on the importance of the relationship, and he played a role. And I hope that Joanna, you'll get that out of him later today. So I won't steal that thunder about what he did. And he remains a friend today, and of course he's going to be with us as a result. So, but after this, I went to the UN and as ambassador, and then left government and joined the private sector. And now I advise Canadian companies through the equivalent of the BRT, which is the Business Council of Canada. I advise the Quebec government, and I speak to our federal government all the time on issues related to geopolitics and the relationship with the United States. So that's why I'm here. I'm sort of at the nexus of business, but also government through that history, and I'm very proud to be here. And thank you very much.
Well, good morning. I'm Saxby Chambliss. Alistair and Georgia Tech, thanks for inviting us today to have a conversation about something that is critically important, not for our state, but our country, but all three countries who are engaging today in a great relationship with trade. And hopefully, we're going to continue for an additional 16 years. Almost in the way in which it has been operated. But what we find out with government when you have any program in Atlanta. My home originally is in Moultrie. I ran for Congress in 1994 and was fortunate enough to get elected. I spent 8 years in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing the 8th District, which is basically central and southern Georgia. And in 2002, I ran for the United States Senate and was fortunate again to win. And I stayed in the Senate for 12 years, so I had 20 years of experience in the United States Congress, which was a great experience. But if you ask my wife today that we had 20 great years, but we don't want to go back. It's a different world up there right now, unfortunately. But still, we're the envy of the free world with our political system here. And in spite of all of our problems, we're still the envy of the rest of the free world. My experience with NAFTA started actually in 1994 when I was campaigning because the issue was bubbling up. My district in central and south Georgia is primarily an agricultural centric part of the state. My farmers were scared to death of what was then called NAFTA. And they had no idea what the positives were, but they knew all about the possible negatives. So my farmers were very much in opposition. At that point in time, we still had some cut and sew operations throughout the state. And those textile operations were scared to death that if NAFTA passed, then all of the cutting sew operations would move from the United States to Mexico. So they were opposed to it. So it was natural for me to be opposed to NAFTA originally in 1994. Then I got elected, and I was on the inside. And I figured out pretty quickly NAFTA was one of the best things that, from a trade perspective, that we've ever done. At that point in our history, Canada and Mexico were our #2 trading partners. Now, obviously, China has surpassed them, but they're still number 2 and number 3. And anytime you have the opportunity to engage and particularly come to an agreement with your better and best trading partners, that's a good thing for the economy of all 3 of the countries. So I became a fan of NAFTA. We've had some ups and downs over the years relative to the provisions. Georgia is the largest timber producing state in the country. And as Louise will well know, will remember that the issue of softwood lumber between United States and Canada has been a long-standing problem. Even though we got to an agreement in 1994, that didn't stop the lawyers from cranking out lawsuits. And we had any number of lawsuits between the United States and Canada over that issue. I was involved with lawsuits number 2, 3, and 4. Today, there's number 5 that I'm not involved with, but in any event, that will be, and I don't know that we'll talk about specific issues that will be coming up, but that's one of the issues that the negotiators will be discussing in depth when they begin together in July of this year. And with the right kind of quotas, I'm confident that we're gonna get some agreement on that issue. With that, I will flip to you, Antonio.
Great, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Georgia Tech, for inviting me for this discussion. I think it's badly needed. There's a lot of noise. I think we'll try to be both honest and constructive, speaking from the mind, but a little bit also from the heart. So let me share a bit of who I am. Antonio Ortiz Mena. I was born and raised in Mexico City and in Washington, D.C. My grandfather was a diplomat, so in a way, binational. I had the privilege of being a member of the team that negotiated the original NAFTA. So my link with NAFTA goes to the Big Bang. And I would say it was very difficult. There was opposition in Mexico from the parties of the left. They saw this as, capitalism run rampant, and from the parties of the right, they were concerned about sovereignty and subservience to the U.S. So we really went out on a limb, and we were not very popular back then. Honestly, I got called all sorts of things, but I think we did the right thing. And in my view, the NAFTA was a way to reset relations between Mexico and the U.S. It was much more than trade and investment. I know that, I don't know if you still use Control-Alt-Delete for you guys who do computer science, but that was a way to reset bilateral relations through trade. But in my view, it was much more than trade. It was a way to say, we are neighbors to the U.S., that's a huge asset, not a liability, as some people thought for many, many decades. And I've spent my whole life regarding trade and investment in North America. I was the head of economic affairs at the Mexican embassy for about 9 years. I was in academia for many years in Mexico, and I've been teaching at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University about trade and investment. And I also had the privilege of working for former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, who had a consulting firm called Albright Stonebridge Group in DC. So from both the government service and academic and private sector practice, my whole life has been about CUSMA or NAFTA or USMCA. And again, I see this as a way to radically alter for the better Mexico-U.S. relations, and then also Mexico-Canada. I did I did go to Tim Hortons to get my espresso fix. In the next section, I would just like to share some ideas to maybe take a few steps back to give a bit of context to share what I think is at stake and what I think we can achieve. Last thing I'll say is that I have 3 children. 2 of them were born in San Diego while I was doing grad studies on North American trade and investment. So there's an integration. Then one of my sons worked for TC Energy. So I do have a lot of skin in the game, both emotionally and practically. But I do believe that there's a huge opportunity before us to take advantage of the current global disorder, if I can call it now, and just do the right thing and do the smart thing, Chris.
So, Antonio, go ahead and tell us from your perspective what's at stake here. Help frame the bigger issue.
Yes, sure. Glad to do that. I think that the current environment right now is very different from the one when NAFTA was negotiated, 1990 to 1993. Now you're getting an idea of how old I am. And when NAFTA was renegotiated during the first Trump administration, I see 3 basic changes. The first one is really the end of the post-World War II order, and I don't think it has been substituted by a new order. I think that there's a great uncertainty in both global economic governance and global security governance, and I fear that might stay with us for some time. So it's a radically different world. The second change is nationalism and protectionism across the globe, not only, say, in the US, that I think has become more protectionist, but it goes beyond that. And in my view, it goes beyond what would make sense from a purely cost-benefit calculation, right? You cannot interpret it through an Excel spreadsheet. It goes beyond that. And thirdly, of course, we have the AI revolution, right? I don't think anybody used ChatGPT when the NAFTA was renegotiated. It didn't exist even a short time ago. And I read a McKinsey paper that says that AI will transform the way we produce goods and services. It will transform the way we trade goods and services, and I would add, it will change the comparative advantage of countries from an economic perspective and also security perspective. You only need to read sort of the debate regarding Claude AI and the Department of War lately about the use of AI. So I think we're in a radically different world, and I believe that that what's at stake is much higher than what we had before that. In my view, it's trust and the security of the North American region through trade. So it's not that trade is at stake or just Section 232 or whatever rabbit hole we want to get down to. It's about whether we will remain neighbors that trust each other and that work with each other, with security being paramount and economic security being a way to achieve national security. So I think the picture is much, much bigger. And when we get discussing specific issues, I think it's important to keep in mind, it's not about the trade deficit or steel, etc. It's much bigger than that. But the upside and the downside, if we don't get it right, Chris.
I just wanted to add, thank you for letting me jump in. I totally agree. I think that what we've lost sight of and what we don't really fully comprehend in North America is that we now have, as a trading bloc, as a region, we are the most competitive regional bloc and region in the world. And NAFTA and CUSMA and USMCA, call it, I really wish we had one name for it. That would be a good start. But is really at the core of that. Those supply chains are totally integrated. We make each country more competitive and how we work together. We have an advantage that the rest of the world envies. And there are people in Europe and in Asia, and they're scratching their heads right now and saying, why is there a debate about this review, this renewal of this agreement? This is the gold standard. And this agreement, which we were going to talk about, is law. It was ratified by Congress, bipartisan. It was one of the most bipartisan issue in the in the recent modern history. And so that's what's at stake. That's what's on the table. That's what we must defend, explain, and exactly what Antonio said, not through spreadsheets and statistics and numbers, through the heart, through emotions. We've got to get to workers, to farmers, to electors, so they really understand what we're fighting for here, especially as the Consul General was saying, in this world of change and turmoil.
I think a great example of that, the Consul General was sharing with me when we met last year, that Ford builds vehicles in Detroit, obviously, but the parts move back and forth between our two countries 53 times, right? Not counting what comes from Mexico. See, I've been using that. I learn, I hear it. So let's talk a little bit, and Saxby, I'd like to start with you about kind of what you see as the issues from the American government on the reauthorization, and maybe what some of the, I hate to use the term, but we have to, what the politics, how the politics play into this lead up to the discussion starting in this summer.
Yeah, whatever happens this summer is going to have to be ratified by the Congress. So it's going to be a political debate, and this is an election year. So there's going to be a great divide, not between Republicans and Democrats, but I suspect there's going to be a divide maybe from regions of the country relative, and I'm talking about the United States, relative as to whether or not they support or do not support whatever comes out of the negotiations. The issues are the same issues that you started with in 1994 from a U.S. perspective. It always is. We've got, for example, we have what we call rules of origin. It's a technical, but yet it's a practical issue that it comes up every time we negotiate it again. And what we mean by rules of origin is there's a product that ultimately is sold in the United States, but is transferred any number of other countries before it got to the United States, before it hit the market. And there's some intricacies between the Canada and Mexico and the United States relative to the origin of that product. The best example I can give you is my longtime dear friend Charlie Stenholm, who's a Democrat from Texas, who was my ranking member on the Agriculture Committee when I came to Congress in 1995. Charlie says, in talking about rules of origin, he said, if I have a farmer in the Midwest who breeds his heifer with a bull from Mexico, in Mexico, transported the heifer back to the Midwest, and when the summertime got around and he took his heifers to Canada to graze, and during when that heifer was grazing in Canada, she delivered that calf. Where's the origin of that calf? And we never resolved that problem. But that's rules of origin is always going to be up for debate. There are labor issues. The labor unions will have a say. And also, there's a major issue relative to forced labor. that is going to be a high priority in the negotiations. And forced labor is not an issue in Canada, United States, nor in Mexico. But it is an issue with our partner in China. There are any number of products that started out in China or maybe transferred through China in the Xinjiang region where forced labor is prevalent. It may have gone through Tibet, which is forced labor is prevalent. And ultimately, that product came into Mexico, United States, or Canada. And what happens and how should it be treated? So that's going to be a major issue. My good friend, who is now the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he was the godfather of that issue when he was in the Senate with me. And he is going to have a lot to say about that during the negotiations. I think obviously tariffs are going to be very much front and center. If it were up to me, I'd eliminate all tariffs, and let's sure enough just have a free trading world. But unfortunately, the relationships between our United States trading partners over the years have involved tariffs, and this gotten out of kilter. President Trump is absolutely right about addressing the issue, and he has a very admirable goal from a U.S. standpoint. How he's trying to achieve that goal is questionable. And that's why we had the Supreme Court decision handed down, 2 weeks ago, and somewhat solved the issue, but it didn't solve the problem. There are any number of tariffs inside of the USMCA, particularly regarding aluminum, auto parts, those types of things that are going to have to be front and center for the negotiation. At the end of the day, I am very hopeful that our USTR, Jameson Greer, who is a very bright, very capable individual, and I'm glad that he's where he is now. And while we're gonna be very forceful in trying to make sure that at the end of the day we get an agreement that is fair and equitable to all three partners. And I have somewhat an optimistic position right now, even though our president has not been always optimistic. I just left Asia. I was in Tokyo and Seoul last week. Both those countries have bilateral agreements with the United States. Japan has ratified their agreement. Seoul is going to ratify their agreement. Both of those countries have, in one case, the president, and the other, a prime minister, they have a good relationship with President Trump. And that trickles down all the way through on both sides of the Pacific. I don't know what happened with the relationship between President Trump and Prime Minister Carney, but it got off on the wrong foot. And they're going to have to, Greer is just going to have to work through the minefield of the political situation there in the negotiations, because we at the end of the day, this should not be a political document. Politicos should have input, but at the end of the day, It's what's for the best, what kind of provisions that are best for the economy of the United States that are contained in that trade agreement.
So I want to add, I definitely want to save time to take questions from the audience with our timing here, but I want to jump into a couple of others. And so, Ambassador, help us understand. The senator set it up well with the relationship between the two principals. What are those other political realities, though, or the big issues from Canada's perspective? I mean, we talked about rules of origin, labor, tariffs. What's going to be top of mind from your country?
Well, yes, you know, it's been very difficult for Canada. Normally, Canada would have been renewal, review, very, 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 very supportive. We were a trading nation, we're an open nation, we're part of the CTTPP, we have a free trade agreement with Europe. So USMCA, I mean, it's bred in the bone in Canada. You know, it's completely part of our DNA. But this past year has been really challenging because of some of the things that the president has said, the 51st state, Governor Trudeau, now Governor Carney. It's really got Canadians back up. I think really it's been emotionally difficult. And then it was, I think, compounded with the discussion of annexation of Greenland. It really hit close to home. So Canadians have had a really strong reaction. And some of the trolling that we've been subjected to on, you know, everything from the Olympic game. And it really is difficult for our leader to clear that fog and really get to what exactly is important, which is in everyone's best interest. Politically now, it's a minefield in Canada as well, and it wouldn't have been otherwise. So now that uncertainty is there, and I just wanted to share it. It's a fact. It's a political reality for our prime minister. He can't be seen to be too cozy with the president, but on the other side, you know, you shouldn't antagonize him. So we're navigating that. It's not been an easy road for him, and you've all heard about the Davos speech and all of this sort of. It's really taken on enormous proportions now. So, but. Despite that, I'm optimistic that everyone will get this across the finish line. I'm not 100% sure that we will get to that review of 10 years where it's locked until 2036. I think it's quite possible, sadly. It's not what the business community hopes. It's not what Canada hopes, at least not the government. But it's quite possible that they'll just be perpetually renewed year after year. That will infuse a lot of uncertainty into the system, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that we cannot agree on the issues enough to plus there are debates on whether we reopen USMCA or whether we leave it as is, because it is enshrined, it is law in the United States in particular, and it's been ratified in Canada as well, and whether we do side letters or tweak it. So issues on the Canadian side, if you were to have asked us a year ago, we would have said just renew it, you know, nothing to see here. It's not perfect. As the senator has said, it should be further modernized, but sometimes you got to know, don't open that Pandora's box, just move it forward. But now that it probably will be open, we've got issues in Canada related to the dispute settlement mechanism. We have had, a lot of issues have been sent to the panel over the past 6 years, and most, not always, but a lot of the time, the ruling is simply not implemented. And so there is a sense, the business community in Canada feels the first thing we should do is at least respect the agreement and implement it. But there are disagreements on that issue. I think we're ready in Canada to adjust the rule of origin, to elevate it somewhat. The auto industry is open to that. So I think you'll find there'll be a bit of an open door in Canada for that, but there are red lines in Canada. And some of them are our supply management in our dairy sector. Some of it is our sovereignty in terms of digital access. Those are things that are enormously important, and we will defend those. We may or may not find common ground on those issues. So that's what the priority is, but It's happening against a backdrop of a lot of anxiety and fear, that a loss of confidence in Canada vis-a-vis our great friend, the United States. I spend a great deal of time on the airwaves, on TV, in my activities, trying to remind Canadians that some of the things that Donald Trump says is not supported by the majority of Americans, and try to keep eyes on the ball. And the business community in Canada has been enormously favorable for the review. The report was just come out. All three countries have conducted a consultation process, and in all three countries, the vast, overwhelming majority of those contributions, as you have in the US, has been enormously positive. So the business community understands the importance, but there is a political challenge, and concessions will have to be made, and whether politically those are palatable for any government, that remains to be seen.
Antonio, talk to us about red lines and top priorities from a Mexican standpoint.
Yes, sure. Glad to do that again. To clarify, a former diplomat, I'm a recovering diplomat, just like you. So these are my own views, but I am the chair of the CUSMA committee of the Mexican Foreign Trade Council. So I'm, very much involved in the process. I would say, number one, to increase the level of certainty regarding the rules for trade and investment. The main issue when we negotiated the NAFTA was to reduce uncertainty in terms of Mexican domestic economic policy actions, right? Mexico nationalized the banks in 1982 without any, heads up. And a lot of foreign investors got scared. So for the NAFTA, we said we need to be more careful about what we do domestically. And also we need more certainty of access to the U.S. Market, and avoid a lot of AD/CVD, anti-dumping countervailing duties, that might or might not be warranted. But that created a lot of uncertainty. Canada had softwood lumber. We have sugar and tomatoes forever and ever and ever. Amen. So it's about certainty, right? Not necessarily about tariffs per se. Of course, we would want to keep USMCA as is, regarding 0% tariffs for all trade across the region. But the main concern now has to do with rising levels of uncertainty. For example, Section 232 tariffs imposed by the US on Canadian and Mexican steel, and also from other countries, and auto parts and other products, that creates intra-regional barriers that make it very difficult to produce as a region, and it creates a lot of uncertainty. So number one, to significantly reduce the level of uncertainty, and to see if there can be more of a dialogue or discussion regarding U.S. tariffs for national security or balance of payments or whatever. There are a lot of tools in the toolkit. Yeah? We just want to have that. Number two, if I can put it this way, Chris, we want to be the least disfavored nation. Under the WTO rules, you have the most favored nation principle. You can't discriminate. Well, right now we're in a new world. It's an uncertain world. And in all likelihood, I think a lot of countries will still be facing some level of tariffs from the US. So we need, for Mexico and Canada, to have the lowest levels of tariffs to trade and invest within the region, and also to have the lowest level of uncertainty. For me, those are the key issues. In terms of red lines, I would say we very much want to keep it as a trilateral agreement. We don't think a couple of bilaterals make sense. And in Ambassador Greer's letter to the Congress on December 16th, he said that some issues would be bilateral and some would be trilateral. That's the way it was under NAFTA, and I think it should remain like that. One issue regarding labor that Senator Chambliss mentioned, I think it's a very important change from NAFTA to the USMCA. Much deeper scope and coverage, as lawyers say, for labor commitments, and a rapid response dispute settlement mechanism. That has been very, very important, and I would say effective in leveling the playing field to make sure that work conditions or wages are right. It's the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do. However, the rapid response mechanism does not apply for Mexico in the U.S. And there are a lot of documented workers here in the U.S. that work in very difficult conditions. For example, meat processing plants, right? Or in agriculture with global warming. So from my personal perspective, I would like to see a reciprocal rapid response mechanism, right? I also have some ideas about what we can do more proactively. I don't know if you want me to do that or wait.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, don't worry, I'll be brief.
Okay.
But given where Georgia Tech, I can give 6 ideas that can be areas for research. I'll just note them.
Okay.
Number 1, and it dovetails very well with what Luis said about the unique capabilities we have as a region. And I would say we should see North America as a strategic asset for security and prosperity. They have to go together. Number 1, energy. We're the only region that can be self-sufficient in energy across the matrix. I'm talking oil, gas, wind, solar, wave, nuclear. That makes us unique. Think about Japan, where you were Senator, or Korea. They're not self-sufficient in energy. We are in North America. Secondly, critical minerals. Together with Canada and Mexico, the U.S. can have a full range of critical minerals needed for both civilian and defense applications, with the difference being that Canada can refine them. The U.S. cannot. So China has an advantage not only in access to those resources, but in refining. This makes it very, very difficult, and we need Canada, okay, for refining. Number 2. 3, food security. We are self-sufficient in food given seasonality, complementarities, and the different types of products. I was speaking with Councilor Laviaga, and Atlanta is a hub for a lot of imports of fruits and vegetables from Mexico that complement, don't substitute for U.S. domestic production. So from a food security perspective, I think we have a huge asset. Now, workforce, very contentious issue these days. I would just say that in the future, the U.S. will have a shortage of construction workers, ag workers, healthcare workers, and I think Mexico has to be a part of the solution. That's number 3. So, 1, energy, 2, critical mineral, 3, food, 4, workforce, 5, China. The U.S. has a contentious relationship with China, and I think Canada and Mexico can be a part of the solution in 2 ways. We need a North American perspective on foreign investment review, respecting each country's sovereign. The U.S. has the CFIUS, Committee for Investment in the U.S. I think we should cooperate more on an investment review. I think we should coordinate our practices against unfair trade from China, like having maybe a common external tariff on steel, and avoid internal steel tariffs, but have a common external tariff on steel, and to produce goods in the region that we were importing with China. So that's a critical issue. And then finally, on defense, there's something called the Wassenaar arrangement. I spoke about that with Adam last night. And that's an arrangement that allows members to produce dual-use goods, civilian and military use. Canada and Mexico are members, of course, the U.S. So I think we could have redundant supply chains in Canada and Mexico to produce critical goods for the U.S. defense industry. So if you put these 6 issues together, you see some unique capabilities that we have. I'm also cautiously optimistic that we will get through this. Yeah. I think we will get through this.
You bring up a great point, Antonio. This will be my last question, and I'll ask the senator to jump in here first, and then Luis, go to you. You brought up China. I mentioned to you before, I was in Mexico in January and in February, and I was shocked at the number of Chinese automobiles that I saw. Dealerships everywhere. I know Canada just signed or is negotiating, I guess, a new trade relationship with China now. On our own, America, nor Canada, nor Mexico will ever keep up with China. Together, we could. And so I'm curious, Senator, from your perspective, how important is USMCA in this relationship as we think about China in the long term?
Well, China was not like the 800-pound gorilla in the room in 1994 when NAFTA was originally negotiated. Today it is. Their automobile industry is a good example. They're producing a very high quality product at a cheaper rate than we can develop that and produce that product either in the United States, Canada, or Mexico. So that's an issue. I should have said this with the previous question, but there's something else that's different between 1994 and today relative to China. And that's the supply chain and the theft of IP and IT that has been carried on by the Chinese government over the last 3 decades. Here in negotiating this agreement, for the benefit of all 3 countries, the United States is going to be very forceful about coming up with a product that develops an architecture that will allow the free flow of goods into and outside of China, as well as our other trading partners around the world. But when it comes to the theft of technology or IP, we've got to have a strong mechanism that we can have certainty that we're not going to be exposed. Neither of the 3 countries is going to be exposed to theft like we are today and what we have seen over the last 30 years, where it's often stated that the greatest wealth of transfer in the world has taken place over the last 30 years from the United States to China in the form of theft of technology and IP. That's going to be a high priority, not from the details and in the weeds type issue, but the overall architecture of ultimately what every part of the agreement ultimately winds up being. On the idea of automobiles in China, I cannot, I come out of the intelligence world in Congress, and I know what the Chinese do. We had a situation, I'm not divulging any secrets, but the Chinese were developing and producing a light bulb that was being produced marketed and purchased in the United States that contained a chip that allowed gathering data from households where those light bulbs were installed. Can you imagine what they're doing relative to automobiles? How many moving parts there are in an automobile? Do you think that they are not installing things that are going to be looking at you, listening about you, and gathering data from you? It's going to happen. I know, Louise, that y'all's agreement allows some, I think 49,000 Chinese cars starting this year or next year, and it goes up to 70,000 a year. Your automobile manufacturers cannot compete. I don't know what your numbers are, Antonia, but I know it's U.S. manufacturers down in your part of the world, and we can't compete in Mexico against that Chinese product. So thus far, we do not allow the import of any Chinese automobiles. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, even though some comments have come from the president maybe wavering on that, but I don't think that's going to happen. But we got to compete in the world with those products. And you're right, from the standpoint of national security, it should not be United States national security or Canada or Mexico. It should be a North American national security issue that we debate, and we solve that problem in this agreement. We didn't have to worry about that so much back in 1994. In the former administration of Trump, when we revised the agreement, it was somewhat discussed regarding China, but now it's gotten more imperative that we have that laid out on the table and that we have a in detail discussion relative to the national security, relative with our friends from China. At the end of the day, I have no doubt that if we work together and develop the products that we all independently develop today, that we're going to continue to be the big 800-pound gorilla in the world from a trading standpoint, irrespective of the fact that China is out there right now. And all these underlying issues relative to national security are on the table right now, and it's going to be fun to watch that in July when they're discussed in the public. Last thing I'll say about our president, you know, I've never seen anybody who negotiated in public the way he does. That undoubtedly is a New York way of doing business. But his comments, Louise, relative to Canada and Canadians, got everybody all stirred up. And at the end of the day, I'm hopeful that he'll be able to put his arm around your prime minister and say, isn't this a great agreement that we've just come to? Like he did last time. We have to remember that he said a lot of not necessarily negative things in the last administration when this was renegotiated, but there were questionable things. And at the end of the day, he stood up and he said that, by golly, this USMCA agreement is the best trade agreement that was ever developed and agreed to in the world. And nothing has changed in that agreement as I know. And hopefully at the end of the day, he's going to be able to stand up again and say that again.
All right, Louise, I'll let you wrap us up before we ask the audience for some questions. Your comments on China and.
I think that answer
It's good. We'll drop the mic and move on.
Yeah.
All right, let's open it up. Do we have a few minutes, Alistair Still? One or two questions? Okay. Okay, we got a few minutes for a few questions. And if you could address the question to a specific member of the panel, that would be helpful.
Okay, sure.
And introduce yourself, please.
Wait, is it working? Okay. Thank you. Hi guys, I'm Ravina. I'm a second year majoring in international affairs and public policy with a concentration in Spanish. My question is, I guess for particularly representatives from Canada and Mexico, you know, there is a lot like about what you guys have been able to, how we've been able to benefit the US, but like what specifically are there measurable outcomes that you all have seen, or is there more that you feel that the US could be doing to kind of make sure that it's a mutually beneficial agreement? And just thank you all for your time so much.
I think what has America done to try to help move this issue forward? What have you seen that have been beneficial efforts on the American side? And how do you perceive
On the
those?
trade side?
Yes.
Well, number one, conversations, just endless conversations. There have been more than 15 calls between Mexican President Sheinbaum and US President Donald Trump. And I think whenever you have having conversation, that's a very, very good sign. That's one item. Number two, very frank discussions. That also helps. That they're not beating around the bush. The US said a couple of months ago that there were over 50 irritants. That's the jargon we use in trade. It's like, you know, you get a rash, you have an irritant, but they call it trade issues they don't like. They call them irritants, right? There's no magic cream to take care of those irritants, but there are about 50 of those, and the US was very explicit, and the US is working together with Mexico in hashing them out before the review that started. Thirdly, I would say the current U.S. ambassador in Mexico, Ambassador Johnson, has been reaching out to different groups in the country in a very constructive and frank and forward-looking way. So I think things are on a very good path to resolve a number of very complex, cross-cutting issues. So I'm very, very grateful for that. Lastly, I would say there's very good interaction between the Mexican business community and the US business community. This is not only, as you say, G2G, government to government, it's B2B, business to business, and also B2G and G2B. It's like several layers of negotiation. They're all very, very dynamic.
Louise, what do you?
Well, I cannot. My response is not going to be quite as positive for our case. I mean, it's quite a difference to see the way that the Mexican, and I've handled the chaos a little bit of the way that the White House works vis-a-vis ours. I think the Mexicans were more used to the history of being blamed and having the finger pointed at them than we were. I think Canadians. I think we're starting to grow a thicker skin, but it's taking a while. And so the strategy now in Canada, and this is why there has not been as many contact points. There hasn't been as much progress made. Canada is taking a little bit of a different view. We have decided, instead of going down the list and checking the irritants off and getting them out of the way for the review, we believe that the conversation be had all at the same time. I'm being very frank, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my analysis, not the government of Canada. But the sense is there is danger in this method because you're giving up all your leverage. So we have decided to keep our leverage because there are areas in which Canada has a great deal of leverage, the energy, critical minerals, just to name two. And the sense is we don't want to give up any more than we already have. We had to give up some digital issues. We stopped the countermeasures. We were the only country other than China to put countermeasures as a result of the tariffs of last year. And so but we did take most of those down, but we are saving everything else for the rest. So there's not much that's happening now until we're ready to put everything on the table and have one big conversation. And I just want to say, since I have the mic, very, very briefly, I mean, just to give you the power of USMCA, with all this trade disruption now, all these tariffs, except the sectorial 232s, USMCA compliant goods are still entering both markets from ourselves into the US tariff free. 85% of Canada's export to the US are tariff free. The median tariff in Canada is 6% if you take the sectorial tariffs that exist, and the 10% now on the rest of the former IEEPA tariff. So this is the power of this agreement. It is, and I believe the president when he really wants to get rid of something, when something is really bothering him, he talks about it all the time. He brings it up. He certainly did on NAFTA. He doesn't talk about USMCA very often. And you know, when he announces those tariffs, he doesn't advertise that USMCA compliant goods are exempt. Just quietly does it. He knows it's powerful. He knows it's right. And so Canada at some level is confident, but we're holding off and we want to have one big conversation, and we're not going to give gifts. But my worry is what you have said with this administration. Goodwill, good rapport does, can get you somewhere further. And that could be perhaps better, but you could also argue that it doesn't, because the approach that Mexican has taken has not yielded so far, a different result. So, maybe it's good. We each have our approach, and the United States has to deal with it. And but I do believe, and I think it's important that we not be scared of the fact that this review will be done bilaterally. It was like that last time. It comes together under the umbrella, but there's been a lot of fear that it'll be torn up and it'll be two bilateral agreements. I don't see that. I think we're going to remain. There are many, many, many chapters, technical issues that everyone wants to make sure remain, and I believe that will take place.
Let's take another question.
Yeah, just probably one point or one question. I get accused when I ask questions of actually just making points, so I'll try not to do that. I don't understand what all the hubbub is about tariffs, okay? It causes a lot of gnashing of teeth and wringing of hands. All tariffs are a very simple, obvious expression, an alternative to complex, obscure industrial and economic policies, right? All they're doing is making some firms, industries and so forth more or less competitive. Mexican government, Canadian government, British government, American government all exercise those forms of industrial policies in somewhat more selective ways than others. So to the point of having free trade, there's no such thing as free trade, never has been. But Senator Chambliss, you made a comment earlier on about how you would like to get rid of all tariffs. And Antonio, you kind of supported that. But then later on, you were talking about selective tariffs for the steel industry. So which is it? Do you want tariffs or do you not want tariffs? That was the question.
Either one of you.
Well, I did say that I wish we could get rid of all tariffs, and we would free trade, and really mean free trade. But that's not the world that we live in. And we're going to have tariffs. And Trump is going to use tariffs as a leverage in the negotiation of this agreement, the way that he has done in every other agreement that has been negotiated recently. So in spite of the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate both passed resolutions objecting to the recent tariffs imposed on Canada. Those tariffs are there and they're going to stay with this administration. It's a fact of life these days.
I just want to acknowledge your question, because you're quite right in so many aspects. One of the things that this president has talked about is the issue of non-tariff trade barriers. So there are many ways in which you can make it difficult for other countries to enter your market. And I don't think there's a country in the world that doesn't have some form of those measures. Here, for example, Canada looked at the Biden's administration, Buy America, doubling down on Buy America provisions. There was 200 pages of it in some of the bills that he passed in his presidency. And that really made it difficult for Canadian companies to bid fairly on some of the infrastructure that was being invested in the U.S. So And in Canada, we have our own issues, and interprovincial trade barriers is one of the things that we're working on right now to try to make it easier to trade between provinces. We have a lot of issues in that area. So you're not wrong. We are all have our own ways of protecting. I think it's part of politics. It's part of what happens in a democracy where you really have, you know, a lot of groups that have legitimate concerns, and so this is a fact. But and this is why some of these agreements that we have negotiated, the CTTPP and the CETA, for example, addressed not only tariffs, monetary tariffs at the border, but some of those non-tariff trade barriers that made it difficult. So there has been attempt, whether it's labor requirements, environmental requirements, trying to level the playing field has been a goal of many countries, including Canada, and to some extent the United States as well. But I think it would be utopic to think that we will get to a totally free for all around the world.
I'll let Antonio answer this one quickly, and then we'll have time for one more question.
Yes, yeah, thank you for the question and personal allusions. Love to debate this. I would say my view is that intra-regionally, Canada, Mexico, and the US should have zero tariffs across the board. We always reserve the right to have different types of tariffs. If there's unfair trade, you can have anti-dumping or countervailing duties. And then when there's fair trade but an import surge, there's an escape clause that's called safeguard. You impose safeguards, that's a tariff. You're not saying it's unfair trade. So there are, you know, emergency situations. Outside the region, I would like to see a strong and revived WTO. I think that a weak WTO risks turning the world into closed blocks, and that's not good for prosperity or security. When the US imposed IEEPA tariffs, it violated two principles. Number one, it went beyond the bound level tariffs. There's a ceiling. You can put them up and down depending on your conditions. The US went through the ceiling, if I can use that expression, and then the US discriminated between countries. I think that's unhelpful from a multilateral perspective. And regarding industrial policy, of course, all countries pursue it. One way that North America has pursued it is through the rules of origin. Rules of origin are a way to do industrial policy. In fact, the IMF has started to speak about industrial policy of all organizations. And it says the way to foster industrial policy is in a very targeted way, not through tariffs. You have different ways to foster industry. And lastly, on China, about 20% of the Mexican auto fleet, Senator, is Chinese cars. I personally think that is a terrible outcome, because by allowing the import of Chinese vehicles that are unfairly subsidized, you are hampering the regional auto parts and auto supply chain that makes us competitive. Basically, I don't get it, and I think it's wrong-headed, and I think we need to produce goods together, autos, to be competitive in the region, but also to export cars to reduce the U.S. trade deficit. So personally, I don't like BYDs in Mexico. That's just the way I see things. I'm sorry, it makes no sense.
All right, last question.
Hey, I'm Trevor Williams with Global Atlanta. Curious, based on what you just said, how you would evaluate Trump's decision to pull out of the TPP 10 years later. Does that look better now that we have a renegotiated USMCA? If I recall correctly, TPP was going to have something like 40% rules of origin across the 12 countries for automotive, and Trump was able to negotiate it up to 60-something percent. 62.5, I think. And then also, there were some labor requirements in Mexico that were put in that, particularly in the automotive sector, that a certain threshold had to be met in terms of wages. And so Atlanta was the place where the TPP was signed. I remember covering that, and I remember it being a big deal when Trump pulled out of it. Also, I would like you to tell us, if you recall, how much of the TPP is actually copied and pasted, or how much of the USMCA is actually copied and pasted from the TPP?
again, for personal allusions. Number one, NAFTA was frankly dated, and as the senator said, we are, top trading partner. In fact, right now, Mexico is the #1 trade partner of the U.S. Canada is the #2. China is #3 right now. And it's normal to have, disputes. So you need to resolve those disputes, and then technology changes, needs change. I do think NAFTA was ready for an update. It really was, One way we went about it is that Canada, Mexico, and US negotiated the TPP. Mexico and Canada ratified it. The US did not. I personally don't think that benefited the US strategically. Number one, it was a way to craft new plurilateral trade rules without China in it, and to establish rules that establish much more fair trade, stronger protection for IPR, a key issue. However, the US decided not to join. Mexico and Canada did. So in fact, Mexico-Canada relations work through the WTO, the USMCA, and through the TPP. So I don't think that was a good sort of strategic decision, and it's not like you have to pick and choose. Canada and Mexico have both. We're members of the TPP, and we are members of the of USMCA. In terms of China, I was speaking with Luis, and I said that President Clinton pushed for the entry of China into the WTO. Mexico was actually the last country to vote in favor of Chinese succession to the WTO, because I think Mexico was rightly concerned about unfair competition from China in third markets. And that's one reason why Mexico is still, trying to work more with North America to deal with unfair trade from China. I guess it's slightly different situation from the Canada from the Canada position. And lastly, it's interesting to see that TPP is not only not dormant, but it has a new member, the UK. The UK joined the TPP, so now Canada and Mexico have, a privileged access to the US under enforceable rules, not, another type of agreement. So I think the TPP is still a strategic asset for all of North America.
Some of you probably have other questions. I'll let you ask these great panelists afterwards. Let me close by just commenting on one issue and tell you two quick stories. Every one of our panelists up here talked about the importance of certainty, stability, those long-term relationships. Businesses make relationships that last 50, 100 years. Back in February, I was walking my puppy one afternoon, and I got a phone call from one of our members of the Georgia Chamber who's headquartered here. He was losing his mind, and he said, during Trump's first administration, and we signed the agreement with USMCA, we thought this is a stable environment. We sold part of our company to a Canadian company and fixed it so that we could just import that product. This was stability. This is what we could do. And then they woke up that morning to find out that there was a tariff applied to that product. I said, what does that impact to you? He says, we'll be out of business in 5 months. And so luckily we were able to work around the clock with different partners in this room and others to get them included. Had another company who during the first Trump administration had a long partnership for their supply chain in China. They saw that was not going to be a favorable relationship long term, and they took them 4.5 years to set up a new supply chain in another Southeastern Asian country, just to wake up in February to find out that country now had 130% tariffs on them. It's not like businesses can turn these issues around overnight. It takes us a long time to rebuild supply chains and partnerships. And so getting this right, having it stable for the next 10 years is critically important, not just for global businesses, but for every mom and pop and every company in the state of Georgia. So round of applause for our incredible panelists today. Thank you all. Thank you very much, and we'll turn it back.
I'm going to turn things over to Joanna, who is one of our co-conspirators in organizing this event in her role as a senior investment officer at the Canadian consulate. Joanna, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for having us here today. It was an incredibly interesting morning with some wonderful panelists that we were able to hear from and gain a lot of insight. And now we step into the second portion of the program where we're going to have a bit of a reflection time with someone who it needs no introduction, especially in this arena. Have had the pleasure of calling this gentleman, starting with being my state senator, to governor, to secretary, and now chancellor. And so with that being said, I'll have him say just a few words, and then we'll get into a little bit more of an interview here with Chancellor Perdue.
Joanna, it sounds like I can't take a job, keep a job. How about that? Okay. Well, I'm happy to be here. It's almost like Louise, a reunion of old friends. So that's why I'm liking here. I look forward to talking about the relationship between our state of Georgia and the eastern provinces of Canada, as well as our friends from south of the border as well in that regard. And I'm going to steal a line. I believe Lawrence Macaulay probably initially said this, but I liked it and I've repeated it so many times. I believe we live in the best neighborhood on the planet. So, and that is North America. And so that's why I look forward to our conversation today and welcome all your pesky questions.
I've been known to ask him a pesky question a time or two over the course of many decades. So as I mentioned, from serving in the state legislature to then as 2 terms as governor, and then in the distinguished position of the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, when you look back, what experiences best prepared you for what then led up to the negotiations for the trade discussions like those surrounding NAFTA?
I think for that particular effort, many people may not know my career was really in the grain business and trading commodities and grains across nationally and internationally. I graduated as a veterinarian, and I realized after about 6 years that that was sort of an office environment was somewhat confining for me. So I went into agribusiness, and our primary was farm supplies, but primarily buying from the producers their output, and then managing and collecting, and then trading to the global players in the marketplace, grains, primarily corn, wheat, soybeans across the world. So honestly, I think that from a negotiation standpoint helped prepare me professionally for sitting down at tables and trying to come to a resolution that benefited both. And in negotiations, it's always a good outcome when you feel like both sides feel like they won in that way. And that's kind of the way it has to be. And ultimately, you have to arrive at a particular price in the grain trade. But ultimately, in negotiations of political natures, you have to arrive at a resolution where people can walk away with both sides holding their heads high and thinking they got the really best product that they could from that. Maybe not everything, obviously, but I think that was one of the things professionally that helped me. But being governor also had challenges that would have prepared similar to the kind of things. There are different various challenges of that and problems and that you have to resolve. But I think those were the preparations that way. But I'll tell you another story. My career began in the Planning and Zoning Commission. I don't know if you know much about land use or planning and zoning, but this was in a part of the Georgia where some people, it was back in the 80s, and when I came back from Raleigh, North Carolina, back home to my home in Middle Georgia, the local leaders of the county asked me if I would serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. This was in a rapidly transitioning county from agrarian nature to suburbanization and commercialization that way. And many of those old landowners had this personal property rights. Like, what do you think you can do? Telling me what I can do for my property or my land. As we all know, though, that's progressed considerably in that way, but that was early days in planning and zoning. So I think what I learned that way, it was like sitting on a jury every month, as you would have proponent applicants come in with the changes they wanted to make in a particular parcel or changing a neighborhood or different things that way. Say a farmer wanted to develop 50 acres of their 500-acre farm there, and they would come in and make an application. And they'd make all the points there, and you'd say, well, that sounds fair. That sounds right. I'm okay with that. And then the opponents would get up, and you'd say, oh, I never thought of that. Let's think about that. So what that did teach me was to listen to the conclusion, listen to the end of the story before you jump to conclusions in that way. So I thought, ultimately, I believe that was probably the best training I could get for becoming a legislator, and then governor, and then my other parts of my career as well. So that's kind of how it started, frankly.
And it truly does support the saying that all politics is local.
Yeah.
So it's not to diminish what it is that you can learn by serving at the local level and being involved. So as we scroll back again, let's go back to around 2007. It was during your time as governor. You took a deep look at international business development and trade here in this state's economy, and your findings and then actions on how to foster that relationship with what was Georgia's largest trading partner then took shape. Walk us through that discovery, and then I think you know where it is that's leading to the entity in which was then formed, and very proud to say still in existence today.
Well, again, back to my roots from a grain perspective, we were trading grain, nationally and internationally, locally, nationally, internationally that way. So that was a commodity that way. Well, as I was governor, economic development is part of the role. We were trying to grow our presence internationally from recruiting companies to come to Georgia, and also provide opportunities for our local Georgia companies to have access to world markets. And I think it goes back to my comment earlier, living in the best neighborhood on the planet. Anybody that knows anything about trade, logistics is a huge part of it. And honestly, your next door neighbors should be your best trading partners. And that's what I really found in that way, was that when I looked at where our trade was, bilateral trade in and out that way, then it was a clear, obvious that our trading partner to the north, Canada, was by far our we were going to South Korea and Japan and all over the world, Europe and everywhere else. But I kind of had my attention focused. I mean, as a business guy, I learned that your best customers are the ones that you're already doing business with. Just go do more in that way. So that was a principle that started me thinking about, if we're doing more business with Canada than any other place in the world, let's develop and mature that and see how much more we can do in that regard. So that was really a facts-based, data-driven decision, just from what was a reality of what was happening economically from a trade perspective at that time.
Absolutely. The numbers oftentimes do not lie. And so that entity that I'm mentioning that was formed is called SUCP. It's the Southeastern United States Canadian Provinces Alliance. And as I said, it is still functioning today. And they will be taking place in Greenville, South Carolina, actually, in just a couple of months. Tell us about the formation of that organization and of the folks that were involved, and how that really came to actually being an official thing.
Well, it was an idea borrowed, obviously. We had created the Japan-SUS relationship, excuse me, when Governor Busby was negotiating, I think, for an auto plant with the senator or the governor from Tennessee, and we were not successful, but they realized we had more in common among our 6 or 7 southeastern states with a trading bloc. Many people were internationally were not as familiar with the Southeast and the up and coming progress that was being made here, certainly from a manufacturing perspective. So they developed the Japan-SUSE relationship there that had been going on for several years, all the way back to Governor Busby in that regard. And so I said, that's a great model. Why don't we do that with our Canadian provincial partners in that way? So I contacted, I guess maybe initially, Premier Jean Charest of Quebec, and we began the conversation about that, in indicating and getting their ideas about that. So the 6 Atlantic Canadian provinces and 6 southeastern states formed this compact. We began in 2007, and we hosted that in Savannah, Georgia. And I always love to tell the story that one of the young premiers from, I can't remember exactly where it was, Louise, but he and his wife were newly married. And I think Savannah may have been the conception place of their daughter, who they named Savannah.
It left quite the impression.
So we had a great productive conversation down there in Savannah.
Had a lot of business getting done, I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, moving on to, as you took the prestigious role of leading the United States Department of Agriculture, you found yourself involved in some key conversations around updating North American trade agreements. At that time, what were some of the key concerns prior to the actual negotiations that you dealt with?
Can I go back to your previous discussion
Absolutely.
about the formation of
Absolutely.
SUSE Canada? What I found was, again, as I suspected, we're neighbors, and I developed very strong relationships with the Canadian premiers. In fact, we hosted Sean Graham, who was a premier there of New Brunswick, this past football season at the University of Georgia, that he had never been to a SEC football game, and contacted me. We've stayed in touch. He's involved with the Ducks Unlimited there in Canada now. And so those are the kind of relationships that have continued on with the Canadian premiers. And every now and then, Jean Charest, we get to tease one another by text in that regard. But it was amazing the relationship that we developed personally among the 12 of us, the 6 governors and the 6 premiers of the Atlantic provinces. What I found was, interestingly, the Canadians may like this, I found that the parliamentary system really developed good leaders. And I gained an immense respect for the Canadian premiers in that regard, being tested in the well of that there, rather than just the popular elections that come and go. But I developed immense respect for their thoughtfulness and their ability to make good decisions in that regard. And we had a great personal relationship that way that I think enabled that, as we both. They were out for the same thing that we were. They were looking to recruit U.S. companies to their provinces. We were looking to recruit Canadian companies to the state of Georgia, as well as doing bilateral trade from those indigenous companies in our areas to have more access to more markets in both places. So we had common goals and then worked to do that. But it really developed into a very mutually respectful relationship. We were able to visit in one's home in Canada and in the southeastern United States in a way that gained, I think, more understanding, and which is the essence really of any kind of international relationship, is understanding and personal relationships. Most business is done person to person rather than entity to entity. And I think the more you can get to know someone personally, the better off we are. Even as I was teasing the Consul General today, I'm not sure that Jean Charest and I would have been in the same party, but had he been in the United States, but nonetheless, we got along famously and were able to communicate. I can remember one time up there, I was in Quebec and did an interview. That was when the water issue was really strong in Quebec. And I made some kind of sly remark about the water and got him in all kind of trouble up there about we're going to use your water or something like that. And that was a very probably unprofessional thing to say, but he had to cover it up from the press release for the next couple of days in that regard. But nonetheless, those are the kind of relationships that we developed over that. So now I'll answer your next question. What was it?
Well, but now I may want to piggyback on what you just said.
All right.
Talking about the personal relationships, I think as we enter into this, as we continue on with negotiations and discussions and doing business, particularly here in the South, having those personal relationships, getting to know someone, finding what it is that you have in common with them is so incredibly valuable. And so I do appreciate you highlighting that and mentioning the thing about the hunting. I can't help but notice that you do have a bird dog tie on today.
Indeed, yes.
And you're even wearing orange here at Georgia Tech for a Georgia Bulldog man?
Well, I couldn't find my tech tie today.
Is it just too much for a Georgia Bulldog, even though you are Chancellor?
Not as ecumenical as I can get there.
But yes, but moving on to though, what I was asking about as we led up to some of those high stakes negotiations as we were going into transitioning from NAFTA to USMCA, which involves some significant negotiations. Can you share a pivotal moment of leading up to what were very consequential decisions that were being made and that could illustrate how complex and how high stakes the deals can be behind the scenes?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Never thinking that I would have been in that role of Secretary of Agriculture and that we would have a president looking at the NAFTA agreement. As I indicated, my business career had been in the grain trade, and so I was aware of how important the commodity trading between the three countries were, Canada and Mexico and the United States, and agriculture had been benefited. Also thinking, you never know the relationships that are going to help you in the future. My relationship with SUS CP also gave me a perspective of those relationships, particularly on the northern border, of understanding that, knowing a little bit about their challenges. In any kind of regulatory process, you have to make decisions about different commodity groups and how that works. I think the story has been told publicly fairly accurately, I guess, about the second day after I got confirmed as Secretary of Agriculture. I got a call from our Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, and he said, "Sonny, what would happen if we withdrew from NAFTA?" I dropped the phone and I gasped, and when I caught my breath, I said, "Mr. Secretary, other than the commodity markets being down probably 2 weeks in a row, limit down, what else would you expect?" Those kind of things. He said, "Well, you better get over here to the White House." So I left pretty hastily and got to the White House. I walked into the anteroom there where the president's executive assistant was, and I said, "Madeline," actually I didn't, I said, "Hey, Madeline," but Keith, the security guy that I had met at Trump Tower, the president had brought him there as initial security because I don't think he trusts the Secret Service. But Keith was there, and Keith and I'd kind of hit it off, talking about personal relationships. We'd hit it off when I'd gone to the Trump Tower for interview for that job. And I said, "Keith, I need to see the boss." And this was kind of a wild, wild west at that point in time, just a few months into the administration. He opens the door of the office and said, "Mr. President, Sonny needs to see you." So rather informal. He said, be just a minute. So I went in and Wilbur Ross was in there. Other members of the cabinet were in there. And the president was getting ready to sign an executive order withdrawing us from NAFTA. Well, why would he have done that? During the campaign, what he had heard was that we had exported manufacturing jobs away from the United States, primarily to Mexico in that regard. But he had just heard terrible things. It commented on the NAFTA was one of the worst trade deals we ever did. And that was where his mind was, where his head was from that perspective. His opinion of NAFTA was formed by his campaigning in manufacturing states about that. Agriculturalists never anticipated that NAFTA would not be preserved, so they didn't advocate over the positive things that would had happened in the agricultural sector. NAFTA had been very positive, I think, for all three countries. It really widened and opened up certainly our trade relationship with Mexico bilaterally, and even Canada, and it was even more so that way. And I went in. Fortunately, my staff had sent a map with me to take there. The president likes images and he likes he doesn't read a lot of policy, but he likes pictures and he likes things that are very clear. So, Mr. President, I said, this was when I realized some people don't think he can change his mind, but I found out very quickly that he can change his mind. He said, well, Sonny, I've drafted this executive order myself and I've edited it and I'm getting ready to sign it. And I said, Mr. President, I need to tell you something. And I took the map of the voting of the United States of America. If you've seen those maps, it looks like sort of in 2016, his vote, it's a sea of red with blue dots primarily in our cities there. Most of red in the rural counties across the United States, with the blue cities being Democratic. And I showed that map. I said, Mr. President, let me show you. These are your people who voted for you to be elected, and these are the people you're going to hurt if you go and withdraw from NAFTA right now. And he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he looked at it, and he finally said, well, what do you recommend? I said, well, I think we can renegotiate a deal if you think it is based on helping the manufacturing sector while not hurting the agricultural sector. And he kind of humped and said, well, Robert Lighthizer was in there, who was a trade representative at that time, and said, well, you and Lighthizer got 6 months to get it right. So that enabled us to begin a negotiation on the USMCA, which became the USMCA relationship, which was not easy. It was complex because we have different strategies of the way we held mostly our agricultural sector in the United States, particularly from Canada's perspective. They had a very unique and powerful dairy lobby in Canada, and they were extremely politically powerful. I see some smiles over there. I think you all are agreeing with me in that way. So that was the most treacherous negotiation prospect of the way their dairy industry was handled versus the way we were handling ours in the United States. And so we had to work a lot to get that done in that way. But overall, I think we developed a relationship, a trading relationship between the three countries that again continued preserve most of the things there. There was, in any negotiations, as I said, there's give and take. So neither side, none of the three sides got everything they were looking for. Obviously, Mexico was extremely cooperative in the manufacturing side of that and the automotive part of that as well. And but I think, frankly, beneficially, we came out with another extension of an agreement that I think has served this North American neighborhood pretty well for the most part. So that was kind of how that began, and I think it survived. Now I know we're kind of looking at it again, but I'm hoping we can, if it needs refining, then all three partners can come together and figure it out. But I hope we can preserve some sort of, because I believe
again, I go back to logistics. It just doesn't make any sense that we create barriers between our three nations that are detrimental to the economic prosperity of all three. In that regard, I believe, obviously, the Mexicans, Canadians, and American United States members have all benefited from the trading relationship.
We truly are all stronger together and there are, I'm sure, countless individuals who are very thankful for your courage in taking on that situation.
It
And
wasn't courage, it was just stupidity, I guess. I didn't know any better.
well, ignorance can be bliss.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, with that being said, are there any personal or just some individuals? Earlier, Chris Clark, the president of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, we heard from him, and he shared an interesting story that he dealt with regarding one of their members that took a lot of work. And but are there any underappreciated success stories that came about as a result of the USMCA agreement being saved and continuing on? Anything that you can think of that really highlights the importance of the relationship, or maybe some individuals or companies that were affected?
I think obviously our aviation sector, Canada had a lot of assets and a lot of industry and aviation assets. I think those relationships to a large degree have been preserved and enhanced in that regard. I think, again, there was a mediation of automotive assets as well that helped in that regard. So I think there were several industries, not just agriculture, that benefited from it, but for the most part, I think, again, I'm probably not the right person to ask about specifically in industry that way, but my sense was, from what we heard, not everybody got everything they wanted, but overall, it preserved a relationship mostly that we think enabled us to continue trading together in a relatively good fashion.
Right, and that's a good thing to emphasize, that the supply chain resilience, ensuring that North America remains the most competitive region in the world, or as you said, our neighborhood that we have here. Well, maybe something that you can speak to with being Chancellor of the University System of Georgia, you are keenly aware of advances in technology that bleed through every sector, be it logistics to energy to crop sciences. With the emergence of technology, how is this going to impact the way that we maybe should consider trade policy today? And what type of impact then do you see that having on the university system?
That's kind of a complicated question.
Well, now you know how to pivot.
Again, I think an educated society is beneficial for any society. I think it helps the democratic process of a citizenry, a civic-minded group that is more educated. I think you've seen my quote when I came back from D.C. thinking my public life was over. I signed into LinkedIn and I said, this way, my profile was born a dirt farmer, tried a couple other jobs, never could escape, thinking I was headed home to a dirt road and a tin roof in that regard. When the regents asked me to do this job, I thought they probably would expect something a little more erudite than that dirt farmer profile. So I said, Chancellor of the University System of Georgia, possibly the most impactful job I've ever had. And I say that because aside from one's faith, education is the most transformative investment anyone can make in themselves. And my role today is creating and helping to preserve and enhance an ecosystem of the complex ecosystem that enables people to transform their lives literally by knowledge creation, but research, innovation, and those kind of things that change society. The betterment of mankind, humankind, globally in that way. And so that's why my current job, I think, fits right into what we're trying to do. All of that plays into the fact that we have to get along. And I know it's unfortunate. We've had some disruptions of that over the last few months, but I think ultimately the relationship that we have and the need for one another will outweigh the differences that we may temporarily have. I'm confident of that, that ultimately the challenges that we have, it's almost like a family of 3 siblings. You know, we had 4 children, and every now and then I'd say, "Don't make me stop this car," you know, from some of the fussing that goes on that way. So I think, again, we won't always agree, but I think we've got more in common than we have differences. And I think that's an important part. Education helps to make us aware of that in that way. So from the standpoint of what I'm currently doing in helping to create a system of educated citizens, civic-minded citizens who are able to understand the geopolitical aspects of international trade, who understand the politics of global affairs that make a difference, then I think it's all accretive to a good society. I mean, a multiple society of the 3 nations in that way. So the more we do that, I think the better off it is. Back to being secretary, it was also continuation of the provincial SUS CP thing. I developed a very good relationship with Lawrence Macaulay, the Minister of Agriculture at that point in time. I think he was back and serving in that role now. I don't know if it's still that way or not, but he went to veterans and he'd been back, maybe retired in 25 or something like that, in that way. But it was a personal relationship. Mary and I visited in Minister Macaulay's home with his wife Frances, and we've stayed in touch. Those are the kind of things. Jose Cazada in Mexico, a personal relationship. We had met there. I hosted them both in Savannah, just like we started off SUS Canada, hosted them there, and I visited in their country. So again, those relationships that help form USMCA, I think were built on relationships of communication and honest, forthright communication that way. So again, it's a people business. And so that's why these relationships are so important. That's why these kind of things here of having conversations today are so important, learning to understand more of what one another's needs are. And as I kind of used the sibling analogy earlier, we won't, just based on our own needs, we won't always understand the needs of others if we don't communicate and fellowship and meet and talk very honestly and forthrightly about that. So these, in our situations, we're different from Europe, we're different from the East, and we're different from any other part of the world. This is special, and I think that's the point that I really want to start off making, is that we've got something here that we don't want to give up in that regard. So these are great communications things that we can do to help one another.
No, absolutely. I could not agree more. And spending time, as you said, just getting to know the individuals who are the decision makers, and spending time, going duck hunting and going to someone's home. And yes, I recall the visit that you did up to Prince Edward Island up there. And it's very important to understand where someone else is coming from. When you see their perspective and you're able to immerse yourself into their environment, it helps to create some compassion but most importantly, understanding. And we are seeing a lot of more of those direct relationships from state to province, municipality to municipality. And that is something that our office, will continue to build on.
You just made a good point. I'd like to emphasize. I think what we found in SUS CP was that oftentimes state to province could accomplish things that nation to nation could not. And so I think that's very important as well, to understand that we are a component of a province or a state in that way. But we can, if we have those relationships, obviously we can be solving problems on a smaller scale that maybe be a pattern for nation-to-nation resolution later on. So I think that was kind of what I was referring to when I said SUS-CP helped me understand the USMCA NAFTA relationship.
And it really is those direct relationships, and that is where and you have decision makers there. When you have the heads of, I mean, look at the number of Fortune 500 companies that we have here in Atlanta that are headquartered and that then have a location, be it in Montreal or Toronto, and able to make those direct connections and build those relationships and still keep the flow of business happening. Or again, the folks in Mexico City and south of the border. With that being said, though, the leadership in a more of a general perspective, you've had obviously an incredible career. Do you have any words of advice for some of the leadership lessons that you learned from those experiences that still guide you today, or maybe could perhaps be some of the guiding principles as some other folks move forward in these critical negotiations?
Joanna, I think it kind of goes back maybe to what I said, what I learned in planning and zoning. Listen to the end of the story and listen to both sides, and then come to your best decision of that way, and based on the good of as many people as you can. You're not going to make everybody happy, but then you have to move out decisively, understanding oftentimes that you're not going to make everyone happy, because if you want to do that, that just leads to paralysis. And frankly, decisions have to be made, but if they could be made with a understanding of what is the best for most people. I think, again, sometimes we get very, and personally we do this interpersonal relationships, but intergovernmental relationships, well, we get very impulsive, and we react to maybe something that was said in a way that we just need to probably chill a little bit more and be a little cool in that way, and understand where somebody's coming from with the context. The media today is in the business of creating really conflict at a personal level and a governmental level and a national level as well. And we have to understand that sometimes things are saying that are not there. I'm a face-to-face kind of person. You can read body language and so much. I know we have to deal remotely with video conferencing a lot today, but you lose a lot of that. So I'm a person, face-to-face kind of person that relishes the fact of getting in the room and understanding the context of where somebody's coming from, and that way to do that. That's I just think that contributes to better success in our efforts.
Well, March is Women's History Month, and I would be remiss to not point that out. Are there some women who were in your life who were significant, either role models or who really helped to shape you, and were folks some women that, or a woman that you would like to highlight and to mention?
Sure, but I'm not sure where you're coming from, just having March being Women's Month. I got 12 months a year being Women's Month. I mean, first of all, I'm the beneficiary of being a mother, of a son of a mother who taught English for 42 years. And I still get PTSD when I hear about dangling participles about that. So she made sure I knew how to diagram a sentence. But I'm also the son of a lifelong farmer who taught me good values of the agricultural law. You can't plant in August and think you're going to harvest in September or October. You've got to do things decently in order. That was a strong, loving mother. There was never, I have a heart for children who I see are abused in so many ways. because there was never a day in my life when I didn't understand I was unconditionally loved. And I think that's the most powerful thing we can give to someone is that unconditional love, particularly from a parent to a child and a child to others in that way. And then I had the beneficiary of being married to a lovely lady, and we'll celebrate 54 years in this September. And she has been really just a, what's the best way to say it? It has been so peaceful. The home that she has created has mitigated the stress in these careers and the things that I've been able to do, once again, with unconditional love and unconditional support and confidence. The confidence that she expresses in me on an ongoing way helps me to have confidence in the workplace in that regard. And she upholds me in that regard. It's a mutual respect area. But Mary and I, it's just been really heaven on earth from that perspective of having been married to her. So those are two initial examples. But frankly, I have been the beneficiary of hard-working, smart women in all of my careers. And we began here at the state. And what I learned early on in my time in the Senate, well, frankly, for my work career, we had strong women there that allowed me to come to the legislature while they cared for the business there. My daughter-in-law actually is running our business at home now, much better than I ever did. And then the people who worked with me, and I learned something when I came to the Senate. If you wanted to get something done in the Senate, the legislature, it was those executive administrative assistants who could make it happen. You know, you want to get the members, know the members, but if you really want to get something done, and Jack Hill and I came up together and we made a point to befriend those particularly mostly women in that role in that regard. But that also led me to employing many bright, smart women who were very effective in their roles. It was, again, a very respectful relationship. That's happened really in the legislature. It's happened as governor, and it's happened as secretary, and it's happened as chancellor. And so I love women.
You are a wise man to have surrounded yourself truly with some incredible, a
You
wise
bet I
and
have.
blessed
Yeah, that's right.
man. No, with Jessica, with what it is that she's doing there with your son Dan in House and County, and what it is that you have passed down, and is absolutely is incredible, and the women in which the opportunities that you have given to. So I definitely wanted to highlight that today. And even as I've worked with Olivia, who is absolutely incredible to work with, I want to acknowledge her for how great that she is in this current day with where you.
No doubt about it. We've got women at the chancellor's office that I wouldn't want to do this job without them, frankly. So they enable and facilitate really, and the progress of getting things done.
Well, wonderfully said. Are there ones to watch? Are there some women that we should be on the lookout for as rising stars? And
You mean other than the women in this room?
wise man, as I said, always a diplomat and statesman. If they're in closing, what are some words that you would like to leave us with? And if there is one message that you hope people take away about North American trade relations and this conversation as a whole, what would that be?
I think, again, personal relationships trump everything. And we're all God's creatures, and, we all have our interesting, unique fashions and desires and needs. But love conquers all the differences. And that's really the message that I would leave. Okay?
And thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Chancellor Perdue, for that warm and reassuring conversation. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to all of our participants today. I think this has been a very informative and encouraging discussion. So thank you again for coming. Please join me in thanking Joanna and Chancellor Perdue.